Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on role clarity and why it is the stealth lever for productivity, employee expectations, and well-being. So I'm Victoria Stewart, co-founder of Beamible, and for the sake of role clarity, I'm head of product and technology at Beamible, but also governance, and I work with our clients really closely on their Beamible experience. And like most of you, I also do whatever flies at me most of the time. Now, this webinar isn't in my position description, but it's one of the highlights of my role. So it's an absolute thrill to be here today alongside Uber Carshare to share our insights and explore this topic. So a huge thank you to Mel and Ben at Uber for co-hosting this webinar with us today. So before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands we're all meeting from today. For me, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and to pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. So we've based our agenda today on your responses from registration. And one of the big themes we've heard is how can we provide role clarity without a huge administrative burden on HR or managers? So we'll be sure to keep that context in mind. And as you can see here, we'll start with about 10 minutes sharing our insights and learnings from a Beamible perspective. And then we'll shift gears for the next 20 minutes and throw to Mel and Ben from Uber, who'll take you through their challenge and opportunity and their approach in their case study. And then we'll open it up to you for Q&A. So throughout the session, we'd love you to please use the chat function to ask questions that we'll aim to cover in our open Q&A session. So just some introductions. I am joined here today by my co-founder, Steph Roos, and some of our awesome team from Beamible. And as I think all of you may know, many of you may know, Beamible is a work design tool which has been designed to make org design and role design much easier, digital, and more efficient for HR professionals. And of course, we're joined by some very special guests, Melanie Cole, Chief People Officer at Uber Carshare, and Benjamin Summerall, HR Manager from Uber Carshare too. So if some of you are maybe unfamiliar or not, I'm sure many of you are familiar with Uber Carshare, which is a peer-to-peer car rental company. And their mission is to free people and the planet from the one person, one car mentality. Now, Uber Carshare makes it simple to turn any car into a shared car, empowering people to save money, reduce waste, and create a cleaner and greener planet. And you may know Uber Carshare as Car Next Door. They first launched in 2013 in Sydney with 20 cars and 60 borrowers. And since then, it's been quite a ride, pardon the pun, including their acquisition by Uber in 2022 and their recent launch into the US. And as we heard from Mel and Ben, that they have also hit 10,000 cars as well, which is absolutely incredible. So as you can imagine, it takes dreamers and doers to take a company on that journey and a flexible mindset with regards to what work there is to be done, but it also requires focus and clarity. And Mel and Ben are two of the key architects behind building their workforce and ensuring they continue to find the high performers it takes to accelerate into the future. A huge warm welcome to you both. So Mel, just a really quick question for you. Why are you interested in this topic?
I think that I've been doing HR work the last 10 or so years. And I think over time, I've really kind of seen how workplaces have evolved. And I've found that the practices and processes behind, and the legislation as well, behind HR policies and the way that we manage individuals hasn't evolved as quickly as I'd like in terms of having the right support tools, having the right conversations, and just being really, really aware of how much someone's role clarity and also, expectations around that, their roles can affect their day-to-day experience as a team member or employee. And so just by nature, I'm really invested in understanding what people are really energized by, what work they like doing, but then also balancing that with the practical needs of the business and the strategic needs of the business. And I love kind of seeing those things come together in conversation, but then also getting to have, you know, really solid analytics on it. For me, it just kind of, it really encompasses both of those things. And so, you know, therefore it's just a real interest of mine and something that I'm really keen to work with other HR practitioners and people in culture practitioners to try and solve for our industry and also just for organizations.
Amazing, Mel. Thank you so much for sharing that. And Ben, how about you? What's driving your passion behind this?
Yeah, it's a great question, and thanks for having us here as well. It's something that I've been really interested in for a very long time. Throughout my career, moving between different roles, I worked for a very large organization for about 16 years in one go. So it's been an interesting ride to do that and to see the different levels, the different layers, the different activities that are required from different people at certain levels. It really sparked my curiosity into understanding how can we make this simpler? How can we make this easier for people and for our leaders to be able to understand talent, and how we can actually expand that talent into different industries. And I did some studies a few years ago in my master's around certain aspects of design thinking and all of those areas. And I thought, how do we get those design thinking elements across into HR practices? Start to understand empathy, start to understand those areas to actually help tailor and improve employee experiences as they grow throughout their careers. So when I heard of Beamible, I started to think about, well, this is really interesting. How can we start to think about some of the problems that we've got in our company and some of the things that we're trying to solve, and how can this actually align to help us do that? So that's what's really got me excited about this.
Amazing. Thanks, Ben. And of course, we'll get into a lot more about what you did do shortly. But before then, I'll just jump into a bit of context up front. So firstly, what's the problem? There is a lack of visibility that into what our employees actually do. And this obviously creates tension, high workloads, and cost to organizational performance. And as Microsoft's Work Index survey found, this gap is as big as 75%, because while 87% of employees believe they're highly productive, only 12% of CEOs agree. And as HR leaders, this impacts our ability to optimize resourcing, plan for the future, and support the business productivity and efficiency. So you may observe this as the iceberg effect. So where leaders see only 4% of the problems, while our frontline employees see 100% of them. Executives lack visibility into what work is happening at the coalface, which can lead to a lack of confidence that people are working hard or effectively. But this is while employees report unsustainable workloads across industries and levels. So the question is why? Well, there's two main reasons. Firstly, one, work demands change really rapidly. And two, work has changed a lot since the Industrial Revolution. And we don't have those systems in place for a modern work environment to provide consistent, ongoing role clarity. You know, do position descriptions accurately reflect what people actually do day to day? And so maybe we'll ask you now that question there that we've just posed. Let's see if we're just going to bring up a poll now, but to really understand, do you work outside of your position? Do you do work outside of your position description? So if you can, we've just had the poll pop up. So if anyone can, if you can just add in your answer there. I'm fairly sure what the answer is going to be and what the percentages might look like, but I'll look forward to seeing.
All right, we've got 11 answers so far, so we'll just give it another second.
Yep.
All right, I'll show you.
Here we go. Okay, well, we can see that a lot of you agree that you do work outside of your position description. A few not so much. And then there may be those that are unsure, maybe because there may be a lack of clarity around what that position description is and what is expected as well. So thank you for your input there. And we might just ask a second question really quickly. Who believes that roles should evolve? So should be able to evolve beyond the position description that you potentially start with on day one of your role. So again, we'll just leave it open for 1 minute or 30 seconds or so, and then we'll look to share those results. Okay. How are we looking, Casey? Yes.
There we go.
There's an answer. Well, yes, most of you do believe that roles should evolve, and that's great to hear. And I guess where this becomes problematic for organizations is that when we are working outside of the position descriptions and then we want roles to evolve, we really need to have better visibility and enable these people to be able to take on different activities and opportunities. And then without that, we then have this problem around productivity, retention, and engagement and risk as well. So let's move on to really what is, around role clarity. So this has recently been raised as an organizational responsibility, being listed as one of the 14 psychosocial hazards named as part of new legislation. But what is role clarity, or perhaps the converse, role ambiguity? Well, Safe Work Australia defines it as when people aren't clear on what their job responsibilities or expectations are. And of course, this ambiguity is real because our Beamible data consistently reveals between 5, but mostly closer to 50% misalignment between what an employee thinks their job is and the high value work that they're doing and what their manager actually thinks as well. Now, the glass half full view of this problem is the opportunity that it presents. Beamible insights over time have shown the impact on job clarity on 1, workloads, 2, the level of energizing work that people have in their role, and 3, productivity, which is really measured by the percentage of time people spend on really goal-aligned, high-value work. So this Glint research found that employees who have job clarity are almost 4 times more likely to stay with their organization, 7 times less likely to think about another job, and are 4.5 times more likely to say they're happy at their current organization. So if your people are your IP, if you rely on knowledge workers or for organizational success, this presents an irrefutable business case for role clarity. But how can we achieve role clarity at scale while not adding a huge administrative burden to HR? Well, the first opportunity is to make it digital and not manual interviews and focus groups. And 2, ideally get ahead of the problem, because role clarity is reported to relieve HR workloads by reducing the need for managing grievances, reducing one-on-one manager interventions, etc., which are all big components of some of those roles in HR as well. Which also then presents a good segue to hearing from practitioners who have done this. So over to you, Steph, and we're looking forward to hear from Mel and Ben.
Thanks so much, Vic. And as we go, an invitation for everyone just to add in any questions that you're thinking at all to the chat, and we'll address them after a few of the questions that we put together based on the registration forms. So Mel, this is obviously, we talked about a topic that you're really passionate about, but why did it become a strategic priority for people and culture?
I think specifically for our business, just for context, for the group here, we, as some of you know, we got acquired by Uber a couple of years ago, and well, a couple of years ago now, and essentially we operate under the Uber umbrella, but for people and culture purposes, we actually operate as a very separate entity to Uber. So we have our own people and culture team. We have our own people and culture priorities, systems, and we can still sort of design things how we like for our organization, which is actually quite separate to the Uber people and culture teams and the way that they manage their organization. So I just wanted to sort of give that context, because the way that we do operate is very aligned, but also quite different. And so for us, we needed to make sure that, one, we were retaining team members. Any HR practitioner worth their salt is that's your bread and butter, is you'll want to obviously retain high performers in the business. So this probably feels very obvious. But much to what Vic was talking about before, for us, having that knowledge retention within the business was really, really critical, because as you can imagine, peer-to-peer car sharing is not a widely sort of known industry. It's relatively new. Well, probably not so much anymore in Australia, but it's very unusual that I would come across someone and interview them and say, and then have them say, oh, look, I've got 5 years in the car share industry. And so that sort of unique IP, we wanted to make sure that we were keeping within our business and that we were retaining a lot of that knowledge. Whilst we were in this very sort of shifting culture through the acquisition by Uber. So our top priorities were maintaining high performance and retaining high performers, but also knowing how to manage our resources, which came down to role design, what people were actually doing, and really thinking critically about where positions sat within the business, and just the structure overall. And so I'll talk a little bit about this later, but we went to the team and we're constantly asking the team for more information about what makes an engaging place to work. And one of the things that was consistently popping up was that people were unclear about the expectations of them in this new world, and people were unclear about what their roles were in this new world. So we knew that this was something we had to address. And I think we kind of looked at it and went, right, we've got two options. We have to do this regardless. It's not something that we think we can leave much longer. We can either go down the path of creating position descriptions for everyone, guiding those conversations, having this very static PD that we're going to kind of set, and then review, or even just forget until someone brings it up again a year later, which is quite often what happens. We can maybe use Excel, which in itself is it's great digitizing it, but then also that can be very cumbersome. Or we can, and then we've got a product like Beamible, which can support those conversations and bolster those conversations, but also give us really good analytics and allow us to be very proactive with managing people's well-being, mental health, workload, all these other things. So it kind of felt like a great fit at the time for this problem that we were specifically trying to solve within our business.
Thanks so much, Mel. And that's brilliant to hear. But sometimes we have priorities as people and culture and big ideas for supporting the workforce, but it's hard to get senior stakeholders sort of on board with that. Yes. So how did this problem or what you did present for stakeholders?
Yeah, it was interesting. It was a lot of man hours and for our people and culture team to pull all of the various different ways that we gather information together, synthesize that, and then present the problem itself to the team, but then also how we were going to find a solution for that. And so the way that we kind of gathered all this information was through various sources. We have, mid-year and annual performance reviews. A lot of people will come to the P&C team to consult, which I'm sure most of you have been involved in as well and understand that. We also do 2 monthly performance and development discussions, one-on-one weekly meetings, engagement surveys, and the list kind of went on and on. And so we managed to synthesize that information and prove that we felt that there was a problem that we needed to solve. That was kind of the first part of it. I think we learned a very good lesson within our pilot too, that the original testing with exec and leadership, we kind of did the testing across seniority levels, which I think was something that we learned could become quite problematic. And so when you look at it, when we tested it in function, that's kind of where we saw the most success, to be able to show that the success of utilizing the platform and how it can support these conversations. So it's a difficult thing. A lot of the people in culture strategic initiatives, you kind of see the outcomes of that 12 to 18 months later. It's not like, other areas of the business where you might go, okay, well, we're going to spend, $1 million on this and the outcome's going to be this much revenue. You're dealing with humans, unpredictable humans, and, different various levels of, managerial capability. And so it is a very difficult thing to be able to prove. But I think if you're in a business and a culture that really cares about proactively managing these things and getting really good, solid analytics on the health of your people, but then also the productivity levels and where people are spending their time, I think that you can quite easily influence senior leaders to at least want to take a look at the problem and potentially test in function, with the success of utilizing a platform like this.
Brilliant. And I think the pilot idea is great in function.
Yeah.
And a lot of people had who were dialed in had questions around the productivity piece. And I'm sure that was key as well. So Ben, can you talk to us about the success triangle?
Yeah, absolutely. And for most people, the success triangle can mean different things depending on the problem that it is that they're trying to solve. And for us historically, the task of balancing the employee expectations, so exactly what they want to get out of their role, versus the well-being of our people and the outcomes, which is around that team productivity, can be really, really challenging. And as Mel mentioned, we were taking feedback from multiple different sources to understand what exactly are your expectations in your role. How do we ensure that the job description that they've been given at the beginning of the interview, which for some people in our business could be 5 to 10 years old, actually matches what it is that they're doing today. But even further to that, it's around, once we've got that clarity around what those expectations are, that's just one part of this puzzle. The second part of this is around ensuring that we balance that with their well-being. So thinking about how do we capture data? How do we capture analytics around, yes, they know exactly what they need to do, but how's that feeding into the motivation behind them actually wanting to intrinsically do the work that it is? So are they balancing their workload? Is their work-life balance in order? Do they have too much on their plate? Do they actually like the work that they're actually doing as well? And once we've got the employee expectations with our well-being set, the natural consequence, and I say that in a positive sense, is a productive team. So you start to see where people align their skills and capabilities with that motivation to become more productive, which aligns through to our company goals and the company strategies that we're doing. We can see people prioritize better to be able to work on the things that are actually important for seeing their business grow. And ultimately, it's just utilizing the digital technology. And Vic, you mentioned it earlier around making sure that we utilize and grow and evolve from a digital perspective to make things simpler, to make things easier for our teams to actually achieve that success that they're actually looking for. And apologies, it's not a triangle. I did change that, but I'm sure that you can all visualize the 3 elements. You can't have one without the other here to really see that employee success in their stuff.
And
Thanks
I think
so much.
yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think the key part too for us was like, it's never been about going one way or the other. Like, you're never going to have a situation where you've got someone who loves 100% of their role. Like, I don't think that I've ever been in a role where I'm like, I love absolutely everything I have to do in this role. Like, it just doesn't. So it's really, for us, it was like, we just need to manage the balance of it and make sure it's sustainable. And it's really about that sustainability piece. It's like, workloads will fluctuate. We know this. It's very normal for people to sometimes have to work really long hours, but then they shouldn't be doing that the entire year. And so it's just about, and for managers, I think that's an important part to discuss if you're trying to implement a platform like this, because I think sometimes automatically managers will go, oh, I don't want people thinking they only have to work 38 hours a week, or like they can never do overtime, or like this is, about people getting to pick and choose what work they want to do. It's not about that. It's like finding that balance between having a really good employee experience and the business having the right resourcing models to achieve their strategies, and bringing those two things together in a nice format where you can proactively discuss those things.
Yeah, thanks. And productivity, I mean, there are a lot of different levers for each one of these things. If you think about, driving productivity, why was role clarity the lever that you sort of chose to improve these different elements? Mel?
I think that's just where we got the most feedback that was causing the most issues for us, as in, team members often, sort of saying, like I said before, I'm not sure what my job is. And even just that, if you've ever been in a job where the expectations are unclear, or you think you should be doing something and you're not, and your manager thinks you should be doing something and you disagree, there's all sorts of issues that come out of that relate very heavily to productivity and well-being, particularly well-being, because I feel like that creates a situation where people can feel like they're not capable or not good at their job because they're constantly brushing up against what their manager thinks they need to do. So just the clarity piece for me also is very important, because I don't know if everyone here has ever been in a situation where someone's gone, that's not my job. Not my favorite thing to hear, and I appreciate that sometimes people do get asked to do things that are not their job, but then they kind of refer to this position description that they got 3 years ago when they first started and went, look at every line item on here. Like, I can't see what you're asking me to do here. I feel like just the nature of the way that organizations and businesses run and the pace in which they run at, it becomes very difficult to rely on that as a source of that conversation. Mm-hmm. And so the role clarity piece is about having a constant real-time conversation about what someone's job is and setting those expectations. And then the knock-on effect of that, is that well-being is improved, but also productivity is maintained or even increased. And so, and that's why I feel like that's a very central piece to solving for some of these other problems.
Brilliant. And that's really clear. Thanks. And Ben, let's get into, how did you do it internally? What was the whole flow?
Yeah, it's we essentially used the majority of the steps in the critical thinking framework. So you think about when you're trying to reach your outcome and your objective, you start to think about, what does success look like in the future? So we worked our way backwards in this to get right back to the root cause of the concerns, and that all started with our survey data. When and as Mel mentioned, we got countless feedback saying that my job doesn't match what I've been told to do. Why am I doing this when I should be doing this? So something we did here at Uber Car Share was, and this is something that we do as a general practice, more because we really believe in reading feedback versus reading survey results in a certain way. So we took a slightly different approach than most HR practitioners do. We actually read line by line every single piece of verbatim and feedback that our people told us. Some may say that's a waste of time. Others will disagree. I disagree with that, because what you're actually reading is not only the words that they're telling you around what the actual problem is, but you're going a little bit deeper than that. So you're starting to understand what the root cause is versus just the symptoms of what you think the problem is. So during our survey phase, we uncovered all of these pieces of feedback, all of the verbatim from our people that were really crying out to us to say, hey, workload's a problem. We need your help in fixing that, because our role doesn't match what it is that we've been enlisted to do. Not saying that this was everyone, but in those occasions. So we utilized this feedback to start to think about, okay, if this is what they're telling us, what is currently out there that we can start to use to solve this problem? So we started to think about all of those different mechanics in HR world, such as, can we start to monitor one-on-one conversations? Can we start to do other certain things to really understand why these problems are occurring within the business? So we utilized some strategies. We spoke to our executive team. We did further consultations with our team members to understand some of their data and their concerns. After collating all of that, we analyzed it and came up with the problem that we were trying to solve in this certain thing, which was to ensure that we had role clarity for our team members. And that really relates to the strategies that you saw Mel present earlier. As we were doing this, though, we really needed to make sure that this was also aligned with the company goals and what it is that we were trying to achieve at a holistic level. And as a part of our business because we're in this steady growth phase, is to ensure that we are retaining that top talent and also developing those people to ensure that they can deliver the outcomes that we need to grow our business and go global in this certain atmosphere. So we went out and put our feelers out for some research. We came across a couple of different avenues that we could trial in solving this problem. We started to look at your simple Google Sheets or Excel to think about how we could do this. We started to utilize our own internal platforms such as Asana or Slack or our internal HRIS systems in Tele to see, can they actually solve the problem that we're trying to do? And whilst most of them had really good aspects around this, it didn't capture that triangle of success that we were hoping to achieve, which was balancing that employee expectation, balancing the well-being of our people, and also balancing the team productivity. So we came across Beamible, and not only was it this digital platform that was very excited. I'm very much an IT guy. I like to get my hands in and play with some of this new technology, but more importantly, it had an incredible user interface that helped make things simple for when we were trying to explain this to our people. So we had a look at this solution. We've got some demonstrations from Steph and Vic to show us how do they use their platform? What can we actually use it for? How do we adapt that to the actual problem that we've got? Because our problem may not be for everyone's problem. So it's understanding how do we use this certain piece of technology to help us align to the problem that we're trying to solve. So we agreed on this, and we took this through to our executive team for a decision. They also agreed that this is a problem that we need to solve, and that Beamible offered the solution for us to give this a go. So we moved into our pilot stage, and we piloted a set group of people within our business. We also learned some lessons from this on what we might do in the future if we were going to do that again, and we'll share some of those lessons that we've learned here today as well. So we decided to pilot within our leadership team and some certain groups within our business. As we were going through this, we started to uncover more issues and greater needs underneath our team. So we had to pivot. We had to pivot slightly on some of the things that we were doing. And what this meant was we needed to update some of our policies. We needed to update some of our procedures to ensure that we were going to get the success that we wanted from this particular pilot. So we were really, really pleased to see the feedback coming from our team members to say, hey, I think we need to update our meeting cadence process. I think we need to get really clear on what exactly are we asking? How do we use Beamible in those conversations and so on? So we went through that process to update our policies and procedures. We then proceeded to educate and guide our team members, provide additional coaching to our leaders to have more effective conversations using this tool. So they're the steps that we took in innovating not only our systems and processes, but also our policies. So it really came down to a couple of things that we needed to shift and to change the mindset of with our people too.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks for just being so generous with sharing really, everything that you went through. And I've actually got a ton more questions, but I'd love to open it up to the audience. Does anyone have any questions for Ben or Mel? And if so, just pop them in the chat, or I'm not sure if you can go off mute in this particular setting, but just pop them in the chat, and we'd love to help you figure out the solution in your own context as well. So while we're waiting for any questions to come through, a question about for either of you, what do you think's broken about the current systems and processes? So, some of our HR systems and FTE models and annual planning are based on an industrial age sort of model or assumptions about work and the pace of change and so on. What do you think's broken about this, and what's the vision for the future?
I think this is only my personal experience, so I'm not talking for the industry, but for me, I think what has naturally happened is you have your industrial instruments, which serves one purpose, which I think were, you know, particularly in Australia, probably a lot more rigorous and than maybe in other countries. But I think for me, it's like you've got to manage an organization of humans whilst taking into account that compliance side of things. And then also just the evolution of HR in and of itself being more data driven than historically it once was. So, you know, years and years ago, it was just actually in a lot of organizations like an administrative function that kind of sat off the side of a CEO's desk in a lot of ways, was seen as very administrative, was seen as almost, you know, payroll or personnel. And it was just this very like overly administrative, less strategic, less analytical, and almost as well referred often to, oh yeah, the soft side or the soft skills and the people stuff, and kind of really viewed it in some organizations in that way. And this is just my personal experience. And I think what's happened is we've then gone, wait a minute, we can be very data driven about this, and we can actually put on our analytical hats and say, you know, we can survey people in certain ways and produce reporting and strategies and things like that. And it's become a lot more strategic in nature and a lot more data driven in nature, almost in some larger organizations to a fault, like almost gone all the way the other way in some ways. So I think for me, it's like, I think what's broken is like we've kind of gone from one extreme to the other. And I think we need to just bring this back. And COVID has done this a lot for us, because at the height of COVID, well-being was like the number one thing that a lot of us were worried about, and as businesses cared about, because, you know, people were put in these situations that were, you know, not normal. And so I think that's helped. But I like this combination of a system, you know, that gives you the analytics and you can report on it and you can heat map and see where you might have issues, but it only works in combination with the conversation. So it's not a tool that like solves for the personal aspect of it in itself. You've got to use that to support that sort of personal conversation and that capability with managers. So it kind of allowed us to work on both things simultaneously, which I think for me kind of solves for this piece. It's a little bit broken at the moment, which is, you know, it's either kind of one way or the other, and finding that balance can be difficult. And people have found that balance, but I just think, you know, that's some of the challenge that some of us are working with as well, and just reminding senior leadership and organizations that we're working with humans, unpredictable humans. And so, you know, that itself has its own challenges, and it's like the surveys, you know, Ben was talking about the surveys. People think we're insane for having team members read verbatim feedback. You know, we've had a lot of pressure to make the surveys purely scale, you know, like utilizing scales and less free text, and, you know, just do one box at the end for like general comments because it's too hard to analyze. But we get the most information out of that verbatim feedback. We understand the most about our organization when we look at that verbatim feedback. And maybe we can pull it back a little bit, but I think that that's a really important piece. I mean, our surveys also aren't anonymous. So I think that also helps us get more context. But yeah, I think that I hope that kind of answered your question, Steph.
Thanks, Mel. It does. And a couple of questions from prior to the from the sort of registration form, I guess, from the audience were, if is the PD a relic of the past, was one question. And if so, what does that mean for our sort of legislative, you know, obligations? And then in the context of obviously psychosocial safety, needing to provide role clarity and so on. How do you think about that?
I think static Word docs and PDFs are a thing of the past. I think people always need to, I mean, and this is obvious, always need to understand what their job is. And I don't think that, like, I think roles should evolve, but not so much so that it's a completely different job. Like, in no way am I suggesting in any way that, you know, people's roles are going to change so much that you just don't have a job description and everyone just goes where they're needed. I think people need to understand their purpose and connection to the strategy, and utilizing their own expertise and skills and capabilities within a business, And so I guess PDs being a relic of the past, I think the way in which we discuss position descriptions and document them in that way, I mean, they always have to be documented for legislative purposes. But I also think that there is a space and an opportunity to just have real-time conversations with people about what their job is, and for them to have an opportunity to say, well, that's not really aligned with what I thought I would be doing here, and maybe there's a different role for them that's more appropriate, or maybe that's the time in which they say, look, I don't think this role is really something that I want to do anymore. Or, you know, there's like the various ways that conversation can be had. I find when people talk about the fact that PDs have to be really well documented for legislative purposes, it's usually because someone has brought some kind of claim to, you know, the HR department. And I just feel like those kinds of claims can often be avoided if you're having really solid, open, honest conversations regularly. And having it in a system is a form of documenting. So it's not like it's just conversation and it kind of goes nowhere. You're still having these, you know, solid conversations with it documented in a system and a platform to kind of back up the conversations that you're having. So I think it kind of can serve that purpose, which is quite useful in that sense. But for me, it's more around just proactively managing and mitigating mitigating the risk of people feeling like they need to say, well, hold on a second, I'm not doing the job, or, you know, this shouldn't be a redundancy, or whatever it is. Like, I think it's more about just making sure that those really clear conversations are happening often, if that makes sense.
Can I add to that as well, Mel? And I think what we often forget are those individual conversations that we have, and we can be guided around what the legislative requirements are for a specific job description. That's not going to change. But what we can do with that information is talk to our people and help them understand the specific activities that can help us lead to those outcomes in this. And it's just finding the right forum to use to have that activity. And that's actually what Beamible really solved for us in this. So we had certain people within very clear job descriptions on paper. So what this tool actually gave us the flexibility to do was to say, yes, we acknowledge that. So let's add, it's like, and then, so here's this, and then we do this in order to help you achieve that. So it helped us really redefine the way that we were having development conversations, the way that we were having performance conversations to help set our team members up for success at the beginning. So it's not that problem at the end. We're actually staying ahead of the problem, as Vic mentioned. So this is all about being proactive and ensuring that what is written on that PDF, which is something that, yes, we do need to have, but how do we innovate? How do we move forward in the future? We can't stay in the past for too long. We can use this to our advantage to help our team members grow.
You. So I've got a question here from Emma. Thanks, Emma. What was the time frame that the work occurred over, from survey to sort of implementation? I guess the pilot period.
Yeah, I can probably answer some of that. It went through a couple of different timeframes, and throughout the different course of those 11 sections that I presented earlier, they had different timeframes on their own. So some of this started when I first joined, which was starting to analyze some of this data. So it really depends on the time it takes for you to understand what the problem is, and that's generally where you spend the most time in doing this. So we ran those surveys over a number of different cycles to start to see patterns, because if someone's just feeling a certain way right now, it's not necessarily giving you real-time, it's giving you real-time data, but it's not giving you data that you can really compare against previous periods. Might be, I woke up on the wrong side of the bed this morning, I'm giving a poor result. That may be how they were feeling at that certain time. So from your analysis phase, and this is something that I would certainly suggest for other people to do, is use the time to analyze properly. Use a period of time and go with what it is that you think. So we used around 12 months worth of survey data to help us with our particular response there. From that survey data, after we determined what the problem and the solution was going to be, it probably took us about 2 months to finalize that research, to really test, interview, understand what was out on the market to make sure that we've got the right product or systems that would actually reach this approach. And then regarding the pilot and implementation, we piloted it over, we run a 2-monthly cycle in terms of our role clarity conversations and our performance cycle. So we ran this, we're actually still in pilot in some of these aspects as well. So we ran this over about 2 to 3 months at the initial phase to collect feedback, and then continuing to see how that then compares into the future as well. So I hope that answers some of that question. Don't do it overnight. Take your time. Take your time to do it, because you want to get it right.
I think there's a ton of elements too, like how much guidance you give the team, how big the team is, what functions you use. Like you might get a lot more, we got a lot of resistance from some functions, and other functions are like, hey, can I get in the system? I really want to use it for my team member. So we had a lot of internal, like Ben mentioned, like we had internal policies and procedures that we had to fix in order to make this work, which also then for us delayed it a little bit. So like, I think it's in terms of like from start to finish implementation, I really feel like it's going to depend on the size of the business and the teams that you actually want to pilot the program, the platform, sorry.
Yeah, this has been incredibly helpful, and certainly I'll give one final opportunity for any questions from the audience. But both Ben and Mel, would you like to add anything further before we wrap up the session? Is there any final sort of comments that you wanted to add, or any sort of tidbits for the audience as well?
I can probably share just from some of my personal insights into this is to be curious. So when it's around shifting your mindset as a HR professional in this business as well. So be really curious around the problem that you've got. Don't think about what's always been done, what's historically been done. Think about what could be done in the future, and think about the technology that's really evolved. This technology has really incredible things like AI. It's got incredible user analytics. It's got incredible user experience on this as well. So start to be really curious around what it could do for the problem that you're trying to solve. That's probably my biggest piece of advice there.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Ben.
Yeah, I think for me, it's like, I had never, I mean, there might be other things that exist like it. I mean, I'd never come across a platform like Beamible. And when you're trying to sell that to a senior leadership team who've never heard of, sometimes aren't even fully involved in understanding the concepts behind what the problems are you're trying to solve, I think that can be very difficult and challenging. But it's a job we have to do regardless. And so for me, a bit of the key element was, I'm not bringing you another thing we have to do. I'm bringing you something that is already happening, that is part of our business and organization and our responsibility as an organization. And so what I'm saying is, this tool can help support that and make it a lot quicker and easier and, less cumbersome for managers, particularly. Even just things like generating position descriptions can be a tiring process if you are starting from scratch, and ChatGPT could probably give you something along those lines, but it's still an individual, like role by role. Chopping and changing in between those individual roles can be difficult if you decide you want to move work, around your team. And so realistically, it's like, it's not another thing. It's more just, we have to do this regardless. And so we can either use this tool that can kind of support that, or we can go and do it manually, or, through Excel, try and build these things ourselves. So for us, a lot of it was, we wanted to reduce the heavy lifting for the people team and for managers. And that's why we thought that this would be, the best way to sort of solve for that problem, but also not make it a huge amount of work for our team and for managers. And it's challenging. It's really challenging trying to get senior leaders to sort of buy into utilizing these platforms. But if you are you know, really like if you're really adamant that this is something that you see as an issue and want to proactively solve in your business, I think it's worth kind of just, you know, going through those challenges, and just knowing that it's going to be hard, but it's going to be worth it in the end if you can really solve these problems for people. Because I feel like engagement levels definitely would increase. You know, you'd want to see your attrition going down. Like, you know, these are the sorts of things you can track over time. But for me, it's really around like just making sure people's well-being is really good, and that you can proactively sort of engage with these things as opposed to reactively manage them, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. And look, you know, a huge thank you for both of you, for sharing so transparently what the process has been, what the outcomes have been, and you know, I guess your passion behind wanting to solve these problems for the people that work at Uber Car Share as well, and for the managers and leadership as well. So thank you, a huge heartfelt thank you from all of us at Beamible. Ben and Mel, you've been incredible. And thank you for all of the participants for joining today. I hope it's been really valuable and you've been able to take away some new insights around role clarity. So we'll wrap up, and as we will be sharing the recording afterwards and some further details. So we'll look forward to being in touch with everyone. I hope you have a wonderful afternoon, and thanks everyone for your time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.